With all the insanity happening with the banking crisis and the real estate market and the stock market and everything, I thought I would start this video with a little bit of a joke to lighten the mood with all this craziness going on. And here's a joke for you. This house right behind me is listed for rent for $40,000 per month. And that's not an error, and it's actually not a joke. It's actually the real price that they're asking for this place. And they bought this house back in 2021 for a little over $1.4 million, and somehow they think that this house is worth $40,000 per month for rent, guys. Now, I have seen houses for rent in Miami for that price before, but we are talking big mansions that are on the water. Now, this house is waterfront, but it is not a mansion, okay? It's a decent sized house, but it's not a mansion. And that is something that like movie stars would rent for that price, you know, things like that. And they're asking movie star prices for, you know, a house in the average Joe neighborhood. Well, let's be real. This is Miami Shores. Used to be average Joe neighborhood. Now it is a neighborhood for the wealthy. And guys, this is one of my favorite streets to walk on. And I've walked past this house here several times before. And I wanted to make this the example to start off today's video as well, because this house, for the longest time, they were trying to rent from May last year. Okay, they started off asking $10,000 a month for rent, and then they moved on to asking only $7,000 a month for rent. They never rented it, okay? This house sat empty for a very long time. I don't know exactly how long, but probably close to a year. And say the real price was $5,000 a month, maybe they could get for this house, right? Well, they never got it. So instead, they missed out on 60 grand plus for renting this house, and they bought it in 2020 for like 800,000 or 750, whatever it is. I'll put it up on the screen. Quite a bit less. And then they decided to actually sell it instead because they just weren't able to rent it, and they ended up selling it for like 1.3 million. So the lesson of today's video that we're kind of starting off with here is that if you want to sell your house, you should definitely be doing it right now. And the reason why is a couple of things. Number one, we just seen this huge banking crisis happen that is flooding the market with uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty at what the Fed is going to do at their next meeting. But also, this is typically the best time of year to sell your house if you want to get the maximum amount of money for your home. Obviously, this person back here was able to sell that house pretty fast. I mean, they tried renting it for at least 9 months, guys. No takers. They listed it for sale. They sold it in like a month or two, whatever the listing says there. It was very quick. There was some interesting data from Realtor.com this week talking about how people that sell their homes towards the end of April typically get the most money for their homes. And it has been determined that if you were to list your house for sale right now, since it's still the middle of March, and sell around that time, have a closing date maybe around the middle to the end of April, that if you're an early spring home seller, then you would be able to get $48,000 more on average compared to people who listed their homes for sale at the beginning of the year. Even though that sounds insane, the thing is, you still have a lot of people who are desperate to buy and are just not thinking clearly, and are still buying under these circumstances that we're seeing right now, just like I just showed you with that house. I mean, somebody paid 1.3 million for that house in February and didn't even bat an eye. And the other thing is, a lot of home buyers now are starting to resume their search for a house this spring, okay? It's already the middle of March. It's basically spring break now. And if you are early to the game as a home seller, there's still not a lot of inventory right now compared to where it will probably be in the next few months. So if you're one of the early ones to the table to list your home for sale right now, then you're far more likely to sell and at a better price than somebody who waits till, say, June to list their house for sale. So I think if you've been thinking about it and you want to sell, that this is a good opportunity to take right now before there's a lot more competition in terms of homes on the market for sale, as well as the fact that the entire effects from these banking fallouts haven't really been felt yet across the marketplace. We saw mortgage rates go down by almost half a point during this past week because so many investors were piling into treasuries, which basically had a huge impact on 30-year mortgage rates. And the desperate home buyers look at that as an opportunity. I laid it out on the line of who should be buying right now and who shouldn't be. The thing is, most people aren't going to listen to me. Part of the reason to seize this opportunity right now is because inventory is getting closer back to the level that it was during pre-pandemic, but in a lot of areas it's not there yet. So this can really work in your favor as a home seller depending on where you're at. But the thing is, on a national scale, guys, this is something to consider. The amount of active inventory, according to Realtor.com, at the beginning of 2023 was 65% higher than it was in 2022. So you might still live in an area where inventory is historically low, but across the board and across the country, overall, the inventory numbers have shot up dramatically compared to just 1 year ago. And I anticipate that's going to be the case moving forward throughout this year and well into the next couple of years, because I think you're going to see a lot of people who are forced to sell in a bad economy. And if that's not you and you have been thinking about selling anyhow and you're looking to make a profit, this is going to be the time to do it for the entire years right now. But don't get greedy, because here's the thing as well. 50% of recent home sales included some sort of concession from a home seller in terms of either lowering the price or giving a credit for closing costs or for a new roof or for repairs, mortgage rate buy downs, different things like that, that 50% of recent home sellers have had to do in order to close the deal. And if you ask me, one of the best ways to avoid all of that as a seller is to just price the home correctly from the very beginning. Because the last thing you want is your house sitting on the market for 2-3 months before even receiving an offer. That's the kiss of death in real estate. And just pricing your home appropriately from the very beginning is going to net you a sale probably very quickly in an environment like this. I would be willing to bet that if you listed your house for sale and your area still has relatively low inventory and the price is correct, I'm sure within a couple weeks you'll probably have it sold right now. The amount of sellers that are giving concessions is going up quite a bit. Compared to 1 year ago, there was 31% of home sales giving some sort of concession. Well, now it's 50%. That went up 20% in just a year. So that just goes to show you that sellers are losing bargaining power by the month right now. And if you want to take advantage of this, this is your chance, guys. Even here in Miami, 41% of sellers have agreed to some sort of concession on the home sale. So this is still a relatively hot market in terms of, homes selling pretty quickly and for basically all-time high prices still. I mean, that house we just looked at earlier, that's the most that house has ever sold for. Previous owner paid $800,000 for that house roughly, and to sell it for 1.3 3 years later is not a bad profit. So they got hosed by not renting the place all this time and took a big loss on that, and have now made up for it by selling and still being able to get top dollar for the home. And here's the thing too, if you live in an area where home prices have been dropping fast, like San Francisco or Phoenix or Boise or Austin, these places that have really been suffering in terms of prices, well, you can still take advantage of this as a home seller, providing you have equity still. If you don't, well, that's a whole nother story. But assuming you have equity in your house and you've owned it for more than 4 or 5 years or so, and you want to take advantage, you can still sell when the market's coming down in those areas. But it's even more important to be extremely competitive and realistic on pricing, guys. Pricing right now is everything, especially since mortgage rates are still 6.5% for the most well-qualified borrowers. So the smart sellers are going to be able to seize this opportunity and still make a nice buck on their home. But the thing is, it's not going to work out for people that want to be greedy and think that, their house is paved with gold and, this should be any buyer's treat to own this house, okay? If that's your mentality, you're probably gonna lose right now. And according to the data, more home buyers today are willing to wait, okay? They're not as desperate as they were during the pandemic buying spree. If people are not finding the house that they like, that meets their criteria, they're passing now, which is smart. It's like a lot of buyers are starting to wake up. But I have always said that no matter what's going on in the housing market, if you have a nice listing and it is priced appropriately, it will sell, regardless of where the market's at, how high it is, how down it is. Doesn't matter, guys. I've seen it time and time again, and you can still take advantage of this right now. Because this is the other thing. The last thing you want to be is the listing that has to have multiple price reductions and sitting on the market for God knows how long. 1 out of 4 sellers right now has had to do a combination of lowering their price and give a concession on the sale because they just weren't smart from the get-go on pricing the home appropriately and just getting with the program and selling the house. Because like we talked about a week or two ago, you have home sellers that are just in shock right now when they list their house and a few months go by and they don't even get an offer, thinking that, we're still in the market that we were in a year or a year and a half ago. Those days are over for now. And they're probably not going to come back anytime soon. So I think the best thing to do right now is to just be realistic on what the house is really worth. Forget about looking at comps from a year ago, because it just doesn't apply right now. You need to be looking at comps within the last 90 days, basically, to see what your house is really worth. Now, this is exactly what we've been saying this whole video and the point I'm trying to drive home. This house, they've been trying to sell since August of last year. And they originally were asking 5.5 million. Now they're down to 4.9. It's a home flipper, so who cares if they get burned in the end? But the point still stands. You got this house that's sitting on the market for God knows how long, and it's not selling. And if you don't want to sell your house, then do exactly what this person is doing right here. Because I think if you're going to be like this house at the very beginning of the video, where you think you're going to rent the place for 40 grand a month, or you're going to sell the house for $4+ million when you just paid 1.4 for it just a couple of years ago, that's delusional, guys. That's not going to happen. But you can see when you see listings like that there's still people thinking that they can get these insane deals right now when it's just going to be impossible. You're not going to see that happen right now. And this is the main reason why. Flip the switch here and let's look at what buyers are facing right now. Okay, in the fourth quarter of 2022, you need to make at least $80,000 a year to buy a median price home of $325,000. That median price home figure sounds pretty low to me, because last quarter of 2022, if I remember right, the median home price was still hovering around $370,000 or $380,000, something like that. But anyways, that's a 36% increase that someone would need to make on their annual salary in order to afford the median price home, okay? So how many people from 2021 to 2022 received a 36% increase in their annual salary? I'd be willing to guess probably hardly anyone, unless they found a new job, got a big promotion, whatever. If that wasn't the case, then that likely wasn't you. And the other big thing is because prices have been going down in a lot of markets, that helps a lot of buyers, but also the fact that inventory has been on the rise, it gives people more choices. And it's letting buyers know that it's not necessary to just jump back in the moment that anything comes along, okay? That's basically what we saw during the pandemic buying spree. But now that all of that's over, you're not going to see buyers jump on a listing unless it's really worth it. And that's really where the proper pricing comes in, guys. I mean, you can do all sorts of things to the home in terms of, marketing and the fancy brochures and all of this. But at the end of the day, The thing that people care about the most is getting the best deal, which ultimately comes down to the price. And some buyers are getting deals. I mean, check this out. There is a couple in Cleveland. They got a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom house for $230,000. And that was a $15,000 reduction off the listing price. So obviously they were asking $245,000. They got it for $230,000, and the seller also kicked in an additional $10,000 for closing costs. So it's effectively like they got the house for $220,000. Not bad. The other thing that people should note from this is that, you know, somebody was able to still buy a house in the $220,000 range in today's day and age is pretty spectacular. But it is in Cleveland, Ohio. So there's that. And the other thing that's giving buyers a little bit more breathing room right now is there's literally 3 times as many homes on the market that have price reductions than there were a year ago, according to the data from the National Association of Realtors. And just in January alone, there was 190,000 listings with a price reduction. And they wouldn't have had to do those price reductions if they would have listed it at the right price from the very beginning. Even here in Florida, some buyers are getting deals, if you want to call it that. There was a buyer in Florida that was looking at this house in Tampa, and they've been trying to sell this house for about a year, guys, which is pretty common from what we're seeing around here when we walk through these listings and you see homes listed for the better part of a year, no action, okay? And they listed the house at $495,000, and eventually they had to keep lowering the price, and this buyer was able to get the house for $419,000. Now, that's still very expensive for a house, but compared to the $495,000, it's not bad. And there's a lot of people who are very bullish on Florida and saying that, you know, prices just can't come down because too many people are moving here. But the thing is, once places get too overheated, that's it. And we're seeing this now in the form of these sellers having to take a haircut on the price. I mean, when you think you're going to sell the house for $500,000 and you end up selling it for $419,000, after all closing costs and commissions, you're getting well under $400K. So, but then again, that guy might have bought that house for $250,000 before the pandemic. So he could still be making a lot of money. And that's where I think today's home sellers could be at right now. If they bought, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, you can easily still sell and make a good amount of money. And if you don't do it now, then you may have to wait for a very long time, because as home prices continue to come down and the market just continues to soften up, it's going to be harder to get the price that you want to get, especially once the competition ramps up. You know, if we see a big surge in home inventory like we do every single year, then you're just going to be competing against so many other houses for sale, which makes it harder to get the price you want. Because there's also another interesting dynamic at play in the housing market right now. It was just determined that there are 3 million US renter households that make over $150,000 a year, but they're choosing to rent instead of buy. So why is that? Why are people that are making more than enough money to buy a median price home renting instead of buying? The average renter household income is about $71,000. So people that are in the over $150,000 category in terms of income make far above what the average renter makes. So why are they doing this? Well, here's the reasons that they said. People who are renting with this sort of income are not able to find a house that meets all of their needs and expectations. So obviously they probably just have too high of a taste in terms of their income still, you know, because it's kind of one of those things where, well, I make $150,000 a year, but I want the house that costs $2 million. You know, there's still a big gap there in terms of affordability, right? Others are just renting because they want some flexibility. They want to try out a new city before committing to it. The other problem is that, believe it or not, even though some of these people are high income earners, they are laced with student debt, guys. And they're struggling to get out of that debt. And even though they went to school and they have a high salary, they also have a high student loan bill to pay back as well, which eats into their ability to save for that hefty down payment that they're going to need to buy a house that's up to their standards. So back to that old saying, right? The more money, more problems kind of deal. You know, oh great, you have a $150K a year salary, but I can't find a house I like because I need to have everything top notch. It also means I'm going to need a larger down payment to buy that house. And on top of everything else, I'm strapped with debt because I just spent too much money on college. So those are all more money, more problems type of things. Now, we can't end this video without talking a little bit about the banking crisis before it's all over with here. And the last thing is that there was apparently some pension funds that got burned big time by this Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And just one pension from the Ohio Teachers Fund got hit with a $27 million loss with this Silicon Valley Bank collapse. The thing is, guys, pensions were already in trouble prior to these banking collapses because a lot of them are grossly underfunded. They don't have anywhere near the amount of money that they need to pay the promised amount to many of their pensioners. And then something like this happens, this can be the death blow for pensions. So if you're expecting to get a pension, you should be really paying attention to how much money your pension has, if they're going to be able to pay you in the future, what you're being promised, and where they're keeping their money. A North Carolina pension fund, they had $9.9 million in Silicon Valley Bank and $7.8 million in Signature Bank stock. So these guys are taking a bath on that because remember, the shareholders are not going to be reimbursed, okay? So if you were a shareholder in one of these banks, you're not getting that money back. It's gone. The California Public Employees Retirement System, they had a $67 million exposure to Silicon Valley Bank and another $11 million at the Signature Bank. But they say because this is the nation's largest pension fund at over $422 billion, that these are still minor losses. Yeah, well, tell that to the people that are going to be getting less in their pension check because of all of this, okay? Even foreign pension funds are getting screwed over by this. There was a Swedish pension fund that had over 2.6 million people that have invested over $1 billion with Silicon Valley Bank. And that's just money that's poof, gone, guys. So pension funds have been suffering for a long time, and this is just the latest thing that's going to be affecting them. And everybody who knows someone who has a pension or is expecting to get one needs to know about this in order to hedge against what might be coming for you. Because, for example, people that are completely relying on retirement with a pension and then say eventually Social Security, and in the meantime making some withdrawals from the 401k, well, this can totally screw up your retirement plans, because if you were supposed to get, say, $4,000 a month from your pension, maybe now you're only going to get $2,700, you know? And at a time when inflation is still raging and making everything way more expensive, that's a big problem. So watch out for all this stuff. Be smart when you sell your home. Price it properly, not like these jokers here with a $40,000 rental price or even a $10,000 rental price back there and just having things sit on the market. Get rid of it, take the money, be smart. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.